Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ashley Vandeventi. I'm the Director of Meetings and Education at AOPA. This is my first conference, and I'm glad you're all here. We're very appreciative. Kelly is busy at the moment, but we wanted to send our regards and thank you all for coming. And with that, I'm going to introduce Joe McTurnan, who will be leading this. He's our Director of Health Policy and Advocacy at AOPA. Thank you again. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch.
You did that, didn't you? All right, so in the interest of full transparency, my colleagues this morning and I were joking that I needed Uptown Funk for some walk-up music. So they apparently obliged. So it explains the red face that you see in front of you right now, because I wasn't necessarily expecting that. So thanks for coming. I know you all, this is valuable time for you all in your booths and speaking with your clients. So I appreciate you coming and spending just a little bit of time with me. I hope I'm going to provide you with some value and some tips on how to work within the system. I know the coding system is incredibly frustrating to most, if not all of you. And I have watched it evolve for years now. And trust me when I say the coding system we have today and the relationships we as a profession have today with the PDAC and the DME Max is night and day better than what it once was. There was a time that they did not even speak to us because of some political issues and some lawsuits that may or may not have been filed in federal court, and it's taken a long time and a lot of work, but we've worked very, very hard to build those relationships back, and we're in a good place. We have very open lines of communication with CMS, with the DME Max, with the PDAC contractors. So the future's looking bright. Now, I wish I could stand up here and tell you all that I have every solution to every problem that you're going to exist. Trust me, the problems exist and they will continue to exist for some time. So it's challenging, but what I wanted to do is spend some time with you today to just kind of talk about the basics, cover the basics, where we are, how our coding system works. Then let's talk about the players. Who's involved, who you need to be talking to, who you need to be building relationships with. And then I want to talk about some case studies, some recent examples of where things have gone either right or wrong, frankly, in a coding coverage and pricing standpoint. So with that, I'm just going to start advancing here. So everybody's familiar with the coding system, right? We work within the level 2 HCPCS coding system. There's level 1, which are your CPT codes, which are codes that are used by physicians, hospitals, et cetera. We are at level 2 of the HCPCS. Level 2 codes always begin with a letter and then have 4 numbers after them. The hierarchy's great, right? It's really easy to understand. If it's an L code, it's almost always certainly going to be O and P. Now, there are L codes that are technically O and P that we don't care one bit about. What's the thing in the ear? Oh, I've lost it. Artificial larynxes, artificial ear, I don't want to say eardrums, but ear prostheses, things that are done in the surgical suite. Believe it or not, those are L codes. We don't really use those, but for the most part, we live in the world of the L code. And when you are looking at it as an uneducated person, uneducated in coding, sorry, you can very easily explain the hierarchy. It's really easy to understand, right? So if it is L000 to L4999, that's an orthosis. If it's L5000 to L8999, that's a prosthesis. Within those 2 main buckets, they all have sub-buckets. So once you get into the L5000s, that's where your partial hands start. Then you go into your L5200s, that's where your lower limb prostheses. Your upper extremity prosthetics start in the 7400 series. So you can look at any one particular L code, and with pretty good confidence, you can tell not only where on the body that L code exists, but whether it's a prosthesis and orthosis, whether it's upper extremity, lower extremity. It's pretty easy to understand the basic nuance of the coding system, right? Until then, we throw in things like miscellaneous codes. So a miscellaneous code is our best friend and our worst enemy at the same time. They're great, except for the fact that there's a lot of misconception out there where people say, well, miscellaneous codes don't ever get paid. Wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Problem with miscellaneous codes is people don't give enough information to get them paid. okay? It's not always easy. You're not gonna get folks that are payers, whether it's Medicare or whether it's private payer, that's gonna say, let me pay you $8,000 because you provided me with an L5999 and a one sentence description. It's not gonna cut it, right? Would you pay it? If somebody came to you with a bill for $8,000 and said, this is a blue-eyed widget? No, you have to justify all that. But where these miscellaneous codes are our ally and where they can be really a tool is if Medicare starts to see consistent language with L-code submissions over and over and over again, the same language, it's coming in, the justification is good, it truly represents something that is not described within the existing coding system. And Medicare starts paying these claims. They don't like processing those claims because it takes a human being to actually look at it. They want algorithms. They want computer programs that will edit these things out. So if they start to capture and their review nurses come to them and say, we're seeing 10 claims a month for this particular product with the same description under a miscellaneous code, they can actually support your application as a manufacturer to get a new code issued. It's one of the things that we highly recommend when you go to Medicare and when you go to CMS and you apply for a new code is to consider working it through the system as a miscellaneous code first, giving your customers consistent language that they can use when submitting their claims. And then that actually will in turn start to build the library of claims history that you need. So, sorry, I just want to check one thing. Okay, sorry, my watch was blowing up. I wanted to make sure there's nothing urgent. Forgive me, sorry. I'm gonna turn the notifications off. Okay, we are good. Sorry about that. All right, so let's talk about trends that we've been seeing in the coding universe. Some of these are good, some of these are not so good. One of the things that we've noticed over the years, and it's discouraging in a way, is that we've absolutely seen a trend by Medicare and other payers to move towards the all-inclusive code. All right, so for years, and the way our coding system is truly designed, it's truly designed to be an add-on code system. If we had one code per product in the O&P universe, we would have a code set that would be completely and totally unmanageable. Just wouldn't be able to be managed. That's not how it works. So when the code set was set up 1,000,000 years ago, it was set up in this base code addition code system so that you could use a series of base codes combined with a series of addition codes that would allow you to describe adequately the true variability that exists in what you're providing, right? So you start off with a lower limb, above knee, lower limb prosthesis, 5321. Now you add your socket additions in, acrylic, right? Total contact. Then you add your suspension, whether it's a locking liner, whether it's a suction-based liner. Then you add in your knee unit, okay? If it's hydraulic, if it's pneumatic, if it's safety knee, if it's whatever it is, and then you have add-ons to that add-on, right? If you're adding a microprocessor feature. Those are things that through the years have been able to adjust the coding system to accommodate new technology. That's how it's designed to work. What we've seen as a trend, however, is now we're starting to see moving away from the acceptance of addition codes. So codes like L2006, right? Your microprocessor controlled KFO. That language now says in the policy article, L2006 is an all-inclusive code. You cannot add addition codes to describe ankle control in that standpoint. You can't add addition codes to describe heavy-duty features, carbon graphite lamination. It's all inclusive, okay? We don't agree with that on every occasion. We work on that issue with the DME Max, with the contractors, but that's the trend that we're seeing. The other thing we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of code language that's intentionally generic. There was a time where it was very common for codes to include references to brand names. And this is one of the ones that's not such a bad trend. Okay, if you look at L5980, right? What does that say? It says addition to lower extremity prosthesis, flex foot or equal system, right? It does say or equal, but it still references a particular brand of foot. L5981, flex walk or equal, okay? Going in the Wayback Machine, L5986, your multi-axial ankle unit. MCP or equal. Do you know that there is still a standing argument about exactly what MCP even means? Because the technology has moved so far away from that first initial predicate product from 40 plus years ago that it's kind of gotten lost to history. For the record, MCP stands for Medical Center Prosthetics or Medical Center Prosthesis. We still don't know where it came from. We've been trying to figure that one out for a long time. But Medicare recognized that and CMS recognized that. So you see a lot more generic terminology being used now to allow for accommodations, to allow for and not tie it down to a specific brand name. Because even if it says FlexFoot or equal, the or equal tends to get lost, right? The FlexFoot in that scenario becomes the benchmark. And when the PDAC then is looking at code verifications for products that may use different technology to achieve the same outcome, if it doesn't look like a FlexFoot, if it doesn't act like a FlexFoot, if it doesn't quack like a FlexFoot, they're hesitant to call it a FlexFoot. They're hesitant to assign that 5980 code, okay? So just some trends to think about. As innovators, as folks that are bringing new products to market, that's something that you need to think about. What is the best path forward to get your code, to get your product to a significant marketable position? Do you want to try and base your efforts on the discussion about it being similar to an existing code that might have a fee schedule that you are aware of, you know about it, you're comfortable with it? Does it fit? That's one way. Or do you want to take maybe the little bit riskier road that says, let's apply for a new code and let's open it up? Now that creates a whole new set of challenges because there's a lot of variables, there's a lot of things in play there that you may or may not like at the end of the day. New codes take time, they take patience. It's very rare that somebody gets a new code the first go around. It usually takes 2, 3, 4 cycles. Good news is that cycle is no longer a year long. The cycle is now 6 months. It's twice a year instead of once a year. Oh, did I go one too far? Nope. All right, so talking a little bit about the coverage side of this equation now. Medicare drives this train. Medicare absolutely drives the coverage claim when it comes to O&P. And the reason that is because for most insurance companies, most private insurance companies, we are simply not a big enough bucket for them to exude the energy and the staff time and the resources to create coverage policy within their system, okay? They are focused on MRIs. They are focused on surgical procedures where they may have X percentage of their population subject to this need every year. For orthotics and prosthetics, our patients are usually less than 1% of the population. So Medicare is the only national payer. They're the only ones that really are required on a national basis and on a consistent basis to put coverage into place that says, okay, for any Medicare beneficiary in the country, this is the policy, this is the coverage. So the private insurers, more often than not, simply just say, we follow Medicare guidelines, right? You've heard that a million times. So if you're bringing a new product to market, really your focus initially is on the Medicare universe. You want to get the coverage, you want to get the favorable coverage set up through Medicare, and then allow that to trickle down. Whether it's Medicare Advantage, which are now required by law and by regulation to mirror Medicare policy coverage guidelines, or whether it's a commercial payer who isn't always tied to that and not necessarily required, but oftentimes, because it's too much work not to, will just absorb the Medicare coverage policy and they'll take it on. All right, so when you're talking about Medicare, technically, the DME MACs are independent Medicare contractors. There are 4 of them. Okay, 2 insurance companies represent the 4 DME MACs right now. Noridian has jurisdiction A, jurisdiction D. CGS has jurisdiction B and jurisdiction C. So there's 2 contractors, 4 contracts. Theoretically, they could each develop and publish their own medical policy. So you might have a patient in Florida in jurisdiction C and a patient in New York in jurisdiction A, and they may not have, in theory, consistent coverage under the same Medicare insurance plan. Now, clearly that's a conflict. That's not going to work. So what the DME Macs have done and what they should do, and there's no issue with this, is they publish their policy independently, but they develop them collaboratively. So when an LCD comes out, or a policy article comes out, or a policy bulletin comes out, you will almost always see it as a joint publication. And what that does is that creates consistency between the 4 technically independent contractors that make sure that this patient in Florida has the same coverage available to the patient in New York as California, as Texas, et cetera. So it's consistent, and that's great because that's national policy. Again, that is much more likely for patients, for private insurers to simply adopt that policy. So your focus really goes to look to Medicare. Okay, so when we're talking about policy, there are 2 components, and people often forget about the second component. But the first one is the LCD. This is the one that people are most likely familiar with. It's the local coverage determination. It involves and deals with anything that is part of or due to medical necessity of a product. LCDs, since what's called the Alina decision, which came out several years ago, requires official notice when a new policy is introduced or a policy is changed. It requires public notice. It requires a minimum public comment period. It's usually 60 days. Then the DME Macs have to respond in writing to all public comments received, and then they can publish a final version. Now, when did we last see this? We saw this with the most recent LCD reconsideration that involved microprocessor knees. Now, I think everybody in the room, I don't know if you guys do prosthetics, orthotics, or both, but any prosthetic manufacturers in the room, I think we all agree that was a great policy change. But if you followed that, it followed a very, very specific process and a procedure. Ottobock, who drove the reconsideration request in that scenario, submitted it. They had to submit all of their research that supported that change. The DME Macs took that in. They had that for 18 months, reviewing it, looking at the research, looking at all the things that supported that policy change. And then what they did, which was they were required to do, was they published a draft policy. And that policy was put out there on their website. Notification was given to the public. They said, we were going to hold a public hearing on February 18th, I think it was. Maybe it was the 28th. In February, we're going to hold a public hearing. It's going to be on Zoom. Here's the link. Anybody and everybody can attend that public hearing and make public comments. And oh, by the way, here's the address, the email address where you can send electronic versions of your comments. That happened in February. Even though everybody that was on that meeting and in that meeting and on that call was supportive of the policy because it was a good draft policy, except for one individual representing United Healthcare who had challenges on it. Even though the support was overwhelming, the DME Macs took that all back and did not publish that final policy until like June, I think it was June or July. All right, effective September 1. So it still takes a while to get there, but it's a process, and it's a repeatable process, and it's a process that you can rely on, you're gonna know. It gives you the opportunity to challenge some things before they go into print, and then they become very difficult to change. So that's the beauty of the LCD. The other half of the policy that people really don't always understand and don't necessarily understand the value of is what's called the policy article. Policy article is a written document that provides information on coverage that is not directly related to medical necessity. So it's not about functional level, whether the patient qualifies as a functional level 1, a functional level 2, a functional level 3, or a functional level 4. What the policy article was actually used for in the new policy for lower limb prostheses and where it was valuable was they took the functional level classifications and then provided details about how a patient could be expected to meet those levels, okay? So that's not about medical necessity, it's about definitions. So you see definitions in policy articles all the time. Very, very valuable because it now gives you all, or providers, your customers, the opportunity to actually give their referral sources a list of things that they should be looking for and they should be documenting if they want to qualify either a K2 patient for a microprocessor knee exception, or if the patient's a K3, here are the list of things that a typical K3 patient should be expected to be able to do. That was a great change, and that was done primarily on their own. We didn't ask for that. The industry didn't ask for that. We worked with the DME MACs on that list in 2017 after the last time they tried to revise the lower limb prosthetic policy, and it didn't go so well. But we got to a really, really good point there. So the interesting thing about policy articles is because they are not tied to the LCD, there's a lot more flexibility in what the DME MACs can put out as through a policy article. They're not bound by that notice and comment period. They're not bound to take in public hearings, et cetera. So one of the trends that we see is they are trying to accomplish more through adjustments and updates to their policy articles and policy because it's easier, okay? It's our job, AOPA's job, and other groups' jobs to challenge them if they're pushing the envelope about that. If they're doing something and we say, you know what, this really should be LCD based, we will challenge them on that. Hadn't happened yet. We're in a good place. So you got your LCD, you got your policy article. And like I said just a minute ago, commercial payers, they're almost to a T, are simply adopting the Medicare rules and the regulations. So I just got ahead of myself on my slide. So policy articles are becoming more and more the way that that policy is being updated. Correct coding bulletins, right? We've seen those recently as you know, policy bulletins that then get incorporated into the policy article later on. These are the Dear Physician letters. These are the policy bulletins that come out, the correct coding guidance that come out. What we have seen as a trend, though, is that we've seen recent policy articles, recent updates. We've really started to see much more of an acceptance of new technology than we have in the past. Things like exoskeletons, things like, I want to make sure I wasn't covering that. Things like exoskeletons, things like powered upper extremity orthoses. These were products and these were services that were for years challenged as whether they were even orthotics or prosthetics in some cases. We've now seen Medicare willing to accept and expand their formerly pretty pigeonholed definition of what an O&P item was to include these in the benefit category. That has led to coding options, which then trickles down to fee options. So the policy trends are favorable. It is a better environment for new technology than it's been recently. If I had a crystal ball and I had to say what are some of the things that are coming down the line, and I'll probably regret saying this, but 3D printing is obviously becoming more and more of a factor in everyday practice. And we're still trying to figure out where it fits, right? Because it's not endoskeletal, it's not exoskeletal. What is it? How does it fit? Where do we code for it? So those answers don't exist today, but it's something that's definitely on the radar. It's on the radars of the DME MACs. They're aware of it. They're discussing it. We are part of those discussions. Osseointegration, obviously, is another one. How does that change the coding system when you don't involve a socket and every base code that's out there prosthetically is centered around a socket? Even with Integrum and the fact that they've got an addition code for their connector, that's a great advancement and it's valuable. But the question is what's your base code, right? So that's a question that has been asked over and over and over again. How do you bill it? Is it a 99 base code and now you have your addition code for your connector? These are things that we're all still trying to figure out as a profession. But we're having open dialogue with the DME MACs. We're having open dialogue with the PDAC. We're having open dialogue with CMS about this. So compared to where things were years ago, it's a much better universe for sure. All right, so let's talk about the third spike on the trident, if you want to call it. We've talked about coding. We've talked a little bit about coverage. Now let's talk about pricing. Now AOPA does have a strict antitrust policy, so I can't sit in a room of our manufacturer members. I can't sit in a room of any of our members and ever say that you should consider charging X, Y, or Z for your products. What I can talk to you all about is how they get to the point. And I could spend an hour talking about this next 2 words, which is called gap filling. It is probably the most most complex, convoluted pricing formula that makes absolutely no sense, but is in the statute and therefore is oftentimes required to be used to calculate fees for new codes. So what we have seen is that gap filling. Stay with me here, because gap filling, when a new product comes to market and a new code is awarded, unless there is a similar code or product that you can reference it to, or unless the code is representing an amalgamation of existing codes into a new single code, they, being CMS, are required by statute to use the gap filling process to establish a new fee. And it never, ever, ever comes out positively from where it starts. So gap filling, you start at, and I'm going to use an arbitrary number here. Say you start at $1,000. So there is documentation out there in the universe that says a blue-eyed widget costs $1,000. Okay? For Medicare to come to an official fee schedule for that, they have to take that $1,000. They have to deflate that $1,000 back to 1986. 38 years ago, using the annual CPI, Consumer Pricing Index, which is the inflationary factor that's published by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, to get to the base fee amount, okay? So they deflate it year over year over year, that's what I'm looking for, collectively. I don't think that's it, but I think you get what I'm saying, cumulatively. To get to a point. So they go from $1,000, say they get down to $600, right? Again, I'm pulling arbitrary numbers out of my head here. Then they take the annual increase to the Medicare fee schedule per year, and they reinflate that number back up to current times. And so they might get to $800, okay? And the reason that is because the annual adjustment to the Medicare fee schedule, while it has been tied directly to the CPI for the last 20 plus years, I think AOPA actually had that fixed legislatively back in 2000. So for 24 years now, we are tied directly to the CPIU. Prior to that, it was arbitrary. Some years it was based on inflation. Some years it was frozen because of laws. Some years it was actually reduced. And I'm not saying O&P, I'm saying the larger DME POS fee schedule. There were several years where Congress decided to cut the fee schedule. So you don't get from A down to B back to A. You get from A down to B, and then you get halfway back to A, and then that now becomes your Medicare fee schedule. So gap filling is not a favorable process, and attempts to get it changed statutorily have just not been successful. Everybody's tried it, not just us. The oxygen folks have tried it. The big HME companies, associations have tried it. It's simply ingrained. To add insult to injury is I've never met a single person alive that has been able to recreate the actual process, that has been able to follow their defined statutory process and get to the number that they get to. It's always off. I've tried it. Very much smarter people than me have tried it, and nobody can make it work. And when you ask CMS, they go, "It's right there. It's in the statute." Well, I don't know how. I don't know how. And I wish I could stand up here and give you a better answer than that. It's not off by a lot, but it's off. I've never gotten to the exact number that it should be. And it could be rounding errors. When you see those numbers, it's like 0.02%. It might be 0.026521, and they have algorithms that are figuring that out, but they've never shared that with us. The good news is that the other way that they can do this is if they have products on the market that do have fee schedules, they can either apply that fee schedule and crosswalk it, or they can combine existing codes and create a fee schedule for a new code. And that's called fee crosswalking. And that is not subject to gap filling. So that is a 1-to-1 ratio. We've seen that recently when they created the OTS versions of a lot of the orthotic codes that we have out there. And this was to our favor. So we had a whole series of custom fitted orthotic codes, right? So let's say an L1843, custom fitted single upright OA knee brace. Has an established Medicare fee schedule. 5, 6, 7 years ago, they decided to create an OTS version of that L1843. I think they called it L1851, maybe? I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that number. But they created a new code that was exactly the same descriptor, but it said off the shelf, includes fitting and adjustment. Medicare's own statutes require them to one-to-one crosswalk that fee. And so for several years anyway, the L1843 custom fitted version of that knee brace and the OTS version of that knee brace had exactly the same Medicare allowable, even though your customers were most likely doing less work to custom fit, to fit that brace to their patients. Now, that being said, competitive bidding comes in on the OTS side and then drives the price of the OTS version of that down artificially through the bidding process. But as far as the Medicare fee schedule is concerned, it's one-to-one. So fee crosswalking is absolutely makes more sense. It's better. And the good news is that Medicare is using this as a trend now to crosswalk fees more than they are relying on gap filling. They've heard enough grief about gap filling that they don't like to use it. They use it because they're required to. So how are the three things, the coding, the pricing, and the policy, related? Well, they are forever, and they can't be separated. They are forever entwined. They all work together. One is not stronger than the other. They carry their own specific weight. It all depends on what you're trying to do as far as what you want to go for first. So you can get a code, right? But if you get poor coverage or you get poor pricing, you may have an unmarketable product. I don't see anybody from Myomo in the room, but I'm gonna use Myomo as an example. And I have a whole series of examples that we probably won't get to in this conversation, but I'm trying to weave them into where we are. Myomo got a code, L8701, L8702, but when they went to CMS initially and went for coverage, they were told you are exercise equipment. You don't fall under the category as an orthosis. And they said, well, no, we're not. We're not exercise equipment. We are rehabilitation equipment. We are custom fabricated. We are designed for a single patient. And they said, okay, well, maybe you're not exercise equipment, then you're DME. And so they created a fee schedule under DME that was a rental rate. So for years, Myomo had to work with their clients to figure out how to provide custom fabricated or upper extremity, very complex myoelectric orthoses as a rental item, where the client, the customer would get paid monthly for 13 months, and then under the Medicare rules for rental equipment, it would ultimately become patient-owned. But it was a challenge. It was difficult, right? Finally, they were able to get coverage. And they were able this year, within the last year, they were able to get a new determination that indeed a MyoPro was an orthosis and was covered under the orthotic benefits, which took it out of the rental category, moved it into the one-time payment category, okay? And now they have fee schedule. So it took years and it took a lot of work, but they finally got there. But the point being is that just because you get one, it doesn't always operate in your favor, okay? If you don't get a reasonable fee schedule that allows your customers to make a moderate profit providing your device, you guys know better than I do, that's a product killer every time, right? If you can't sell it, if it costs people more to buy it than they can turn around and provide it for, people are gonna look for something else. Same thing, if you have a great product and nobody covers it, people aren't gonna pay for it out of pocket. Conversely, if you have a great product and people say, how do I code it? And you say 99, right? What are they going to do? They're going to look for a product from your competitor that has code. So all three are different, but all three carry about the same weight. All right, so I'm going to pull a card out of my pocket here because I got to get this right. Who's familiar with the PDAC? I'm sure everybody in the room has worked with the PDAC at one point or another, right? Who can tell me, and this is our audience participation part, who can tell me the current name of the PDAC medical director? Come on, somebody's got it. Somebody can even give me the wrong one, because that's what I was expecting. So who knows the name Michael Felix? Any light bulbs going off? Is he the guy? Russell. That's what I expected. I expect somebody to say, Dr. Felix, right? Dr. Michael Felix was the PDAC medical director for the last 4 or 5 years. He left the PDAC in May. Anybody know Jason Stroud? Jason Stroud is the current medical director of the PDAC. PDAC also has a CPO. They are required under their contract to have a full-time CPO on staff to advise on orthotics and prosthetics. They don't have to have a specialist from any other specialty. It's a contractual requirement. Who's the current CPO on staff at the PDAC? I'm not trying to call anybody out, but Keith Wilson. Okay. Keith Wilson is the current PDAC CPO. He was here yesterday. So was Dr. Stroud. So is the third gentleman that I'm going to tell you about, and this is where I'm going to pull my phone out to look at his name because I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Third gentleman's first name is Sampat, and his last name is Nadadadavulu. Sampat is a biomechanical engineer. And those three folks, and there's another associate medical director whose name is Leslie Stevens, who's also on staff at the PDAC. Those are 4 names that everybody here should become intimately familiar with, because if you are going to the PDAC, you are going to talk to at least one of those folks. And you want to talk to them before they make a decision on your product. And they are very cordial, they're very smart, they're very knowledgeable, and they can be an ally. So it's that's what I'm saying here is maximize your opportunities. Know who the players are and open up the dialogue with the people that are ultimately making the decisions. All right, at the DME Max, it's the medical directors. It starts and ends with the medical directors. So jurisdiction A is Smitha Baliamanda. Jurisdiction B is Sunil Lala. Jurisdiction C is Dr. Robert Hoover, who has been there since I think I was born. And jurisdiction D is Angela Jenny. They are the lead medical directors for each of the 4 DME contracts. Building relationships with those folks in advance goes miles in dealing with issues when they come up down the road. Like I said earlier, there was a time where we just didn't have relationships. AOPA at one point filed suit against the government and CMS to try and accomplish something, and it turned out to be very expensive and never even got to a courtroom because of procedural issues. But what it did do is it destroyed the relationships and the trust that we had with the DME MAC contractors. They for years would hide behind that and say, we can't even talk to you, Joe, because our bosses at CMS are very wary of the potential for litigation. And in hindsight, as an organization, and I'll say this out loud, and hopefully none of my board kills me for this because they're all different people, but it was not in the best strategic interest of the organization to go down that path. It is much better to pursue it through relationships, through sub-regulatory channels, and work the issues that way, because it's taken 10 years to rebuild a lot of those relationships, and they're in a really, really good place now. But it's something that we work on all the time. As manufacturers, I assume everybody in the room is a manufacturer because I don't think this is open to anybody else. If you don't have folks that are having regular dialogue with this PDAC, if you're not having folks that are having regular dialogue with the DME Max, I highly recommend it. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt you. It's only going to build trust. It's only going to build efforts to collaborate. And if you all have issues and feel more comfortable bringing them to the advocacy team at AOPA, that's part of what we provide for your membership as well. So we're happy to do that. We're happy to build relationships and bring up the issues. One of the things we're working on right now through AOPA that is probably of interest to the manufacturing community is we all know there's a huge hole in osteoarthritis knee braces, right? Medicare is simply not covering them unless you can show there is a history of recent injury to, surgery on, or ligamentous instability of the knee. Who does OA braces? Anybody in the room? No? Okay, there's one. So what does an OA brace do? Opens up the knee compartment. It stops bone from rubbing against bone and causing pain, right? I know that's very, very simplified. But the problem is there's usually no documented instability of the ligaments. It's not a ligamentous issue. It's a bone issue. It's a cartilage issue. But the policy says if a knee brace, any knee brace is going to be covered, you either have to have recent injury to or surgery on the knee, or you have to have documentation of joint laxity through like something like an anterior drawer test or something like that. Well, OA it's not in the equation. So what we see in prior authorization and in cert audits and in TPEs is these extremely high error rates for OA braces. Yet in the policy article, they do a great job of defining L1843 and L1845 as saying these are braces that are designed to unload the knee compartment and treat osteoarthritis, but then the LCD doesn't back it up. So AOPA a year ago filed an LCD reconsideration request to ask the DME Max to add in osteoarthritis, pain, without ligamentous involvement as a eligible diagnosis for coverage. So in the immortal words of Dr. Lala, the Jurisdiction B medical director, I meet with them on a quarterly basis, and every time I ask him about it, he smiles, he kind of looks off camera and he says, "Joe, you'll see it when you see it." So that means that they're working on it. They have all the literature. I am hopeful that we're going to see a positive result on that soon. But the literature we submitted was strong, but it was limited. And they want everything that comes through in a policy change. They want to see clinical literature that backs it up. So we're working on it. I think we're in a good way to get there. But CMS. So if you're going new codes, you don't necessarily need to be talking to the PDAC or the DME Max. The folks that make the determination on new codes is the CMS alphanumeric panel. So build those relationships. It's Felicia Wilson, I think is her name. It was Felicia Eggleston, was the CMS employee that handled that. Don't quote me on the last name. I should know that. But the CMS work group, there is a HCPCS panel, a CMS coding page, and we can always get a copy of that website out. That gives you all the information you need on how to submit a new code application, what they're looking for, how to do it. It's all online now. It's now twice a year instead of once a year. It used to be a once a year process that then would take another 12 months to get a code issued. It was very burdensome. They've really done a good job of moving away from some of the administrative burden that was associated with that process, so you can get new products to market quicker and get new codes issued. The other thing that we've really seen, which is a good trend, is we have seen a propensity to create new codes much more often than they would have in the past. There were years we simply did not have any new codes issued in the L code system. We're starting to see willingness to create new codes more often now that the science backs it up. So really good things there. Some things to think about when you're talking to either the PDAC or CMS. Number one, don't ask questions if you don't already know the answer. You do not want to go to the DME Max, to the PDAC, to CMS, and ask them to fix the problem. You don't want to say, what's the solution here? You want to go in with a question that you're pretty sure you know the answer to. You want to confirm what you already know, okay? Don't answer questions that nobody asked you. I've seen so many people torpedo their own code applications because they are asked a question. Okay, when you go into these public meetings, they used to be in person, now they're almost always virtual. When you go into the public meeting, there's literally a panel of folks, and now they're all on the Brady Bunch squares on the screen, but they will ask questions. And I have seen repeatedly people ignore the question they were asked and then go into something else, whether it was how great the product is, how much better it is than somebody else's. Guys, they don't care. If they're asking a question and they're asking a question in a public forum, they're asking a question for a very specific reason, and the worst thing you can do is not give them an answer. If you don't have an answer, that's fine, all right? Let them know, hey, that's something I need to research. That's something I need to do a little bit of asking my team about. I will follow up with you by XX date. Okay, give them a reasonable time frame where you will have an answer to their question, but don't ignore the question and don't deflect the question. Okay, it's not going to serve you. I remember very early in my career, I went to a public meeting when they were still in Baltimore in person, and there was a gentleman that was applying for a new code for a prosthetic foot. He was a prosthetic user himself, and he literally got on stage and danced because he wanted to show the panel how good this foot was. Right? That's not what the panel was asking this person, and very well respected. I mean, I don't want to tip hats at all in any way, shape, or form because his intent was perfect, but he didn't do himself or his company any favors by trying to make the argument that he had a better mousetrap. They don't care if it's better. They want to know how it's different, how it doesn't meet existing codes, because if you don't tell them that, they're either going to say there's no program need, okay, or there wasn't enough information. And if you don't tell them how it's different, they may pigeonhole it into something that you're not going to be happy with, into some other code that they think is a close match. Okay. Number 3, don't ever underestimate the value of the human component. The other side of the equation that I just told you about, where the guy was showing how springy his feet were by dancing. There was an upper extremity manufacturer, and I honestly don't remember who it was, but it was for one of the very, very early versions of the articulated myoelectric hands. I don't think it was a major manufacturer. I don't recall. I don't want to say yes, no, or otherwise. But they did a great presentation, and the very last thing they did was they had a CMS employee, somebody that actually was working in the building that day, that used their product. And I know it was like the perfect storm, right? But they had that person come down to the room. That person knew everybody that was sitting at that panel table, and they did this, and they showed them how their prosthetic hand worked and how it helped them do their job with their colleagues at work every day, okay? It's not exploitative. It's not exploitative. If you have videos of patients using the product, showing how it works, don't focus on this, why it's different, right? There is value there. One door over, they're talking about so everybody can move. It's probably the most powerful advocacy-based initiative that I've seen in my 30 years in O&P. The amount of success that program has had in a very, very short amount of time is incredible. And one of the reasons, besides the tireless advocates that we have that are working this at the states every single day, but one of the reasons that it has been so successful is because it is such a great story to tell. What politician, what policymaker, who in their right mind wants to say, I don't think it's a good idea for you to be able to shower and stand up while you're showering. I don't think it's a good idea for, your child to play basketball with their colleagues at school. I'm not going to vote for this. There's a human factor that's so important and so valuable. It is our greatest asset as a profession. And it's a shame that we only see it highlighted in the public arena every 4 years when it is my political statement of the day, sorry, when the Olympics are on, not even the Paralympics, but when the Olympics are on and you see the Toyota commercials and you see the other commercials and you see Jessica Long and you see all these people, right? And then they go away. But what, I have friends that know what I do for a living and they're like, oh my God, I saw the commercial. It's like, oh my God, we had nothing to do with that. like we can tell that story ourselves every single day. So how that relates to this is don't underestimate the value of what that brings. Certainly don't ever make it the focus of your application because again, you don't want to answer questions they're not asking you, but there's value in that human component. If you have a good story, share it. Tell how that product is helping your patients and how it's different from what else is already on the market. Finally, collaborate for success. I know that there are probably people in this room that are looking at other people in this room and giving the stink eye. And they're growling and they're competitors, whether you're friendly competitors or whether you're fierce competitors. Point is that we have strength and our voices are stronger when we are working together. I had a meeting yesterday with the PDAC folks. We spent about a half an hour in the AOPA booth just chatting, just talking about how we can work together. And from the medical director to Sampat to Keith Wilson, they all said the same thing. Build coalitions. If you have questions, if you have issues, it is much stronger coming from a standpoint of industry, coming from a standpoint of collaboration than to have 6 manufacturers with the same style of product submit 6 different requests that don't all say the same thing. Okay, so it's an opportunity to get together with your competitors when you have common goals, common interests in mind, and work together towards a common goal. It happened on the MPKs. Autobach drove that train, but there was involvement from all of the MPK manufacturers out there, and it was a very, very successful initiative. All right, so I covered a lot of these already. I'm going to blaze through them. I know we're doing okay. We've got 10 minutes. I do want to open it up for questions, but some of the things that I just want to talk about, I already talked about the OA braces. If this is one of the things that if AOPA can successfully move this needle from what our members are telling us, this is something that's going to mean real value to their practice on an everyday basis. The microprocessor knees, I think we talked about extensively. The only thing I'll say there, especially since I have a captive audience here, is as a profession, in the immortal words of Spider-Man's uncle, I don't remember his uncle's name, but Spider-Man's uncle, with great power comes great responsibility, right? I don't know, does anybody read the O&P Almanac? I actually put that phrase in my article when I wrote it about this policy change. If we want to really start burning bridges and impact relationships with the DME Max in a negative way, we should start putting MPKs on every single K2 patient, and we'll see how quickly that just absolutely destroys all of our credibility. The policy change, and if anybody snippets out the fact that I said you should put MPK2s on every K2 patient, I will deny it vehemently. Russell, you're my witness. That's not what I'm saying at all. This is a great policy expansion. It is great for our patients. Frankly, it's great for our practices, and it's great for businesses that are manufacturing these. It's opening up an entirely new population. The policy is very, very specific. The criteria is very, very specific. There's a prior authorization and process in play that's going to control that process on the front end. We need to make sure we are doing our part. And it's going to be a very successful program. Right now, we have 90+% success rate on the first go on prior auth for microprocessor knees. There's absolutely no reason why that shouldn't continue as long as we're educating folks and people understand what the criteria are and are educating their physician resources to make sure they're getting the documentation to support it. Adjustable prosthetic socket. So I'm gonna use a brand name. It's not tied to this one brand, but Click Medicals did a great job in checking all the boxes in the application process to get this done. This applies to other products that are out there on the market, but again, there's very specific policy language now in place for the adjustable prosthetic socket codes, the ratchet style. Is this applicable to orthoses? Not yet. It's a prosthetic code, right? I'm sure there's going to be code apps that will want to create a mirror code because there is orthotic applications for this. The precedence has been set that this is a covered benefit, a valuable item. It should be an easy go for an orthotic version of this technology in the pretty near future. Bone-anchored prostheses, osseointegration. We talked a little bit about that. There's some challenges there. We have a code, we have reimbursement for a connector. We don't have policy, and we don't have enough codes to describe a complete bone-anchored style prosthesis. We have part of the equation, and there's still some work to be done there. Upper extremity powered orthoses, I talked about this already. So this is MyoPros. There may be other products on the market, either in development or already there, that are starting to come into play that will use this technology. Again, the code language allows, it's not product specific, but there was just a tremendous amount of work done by Myoma, the manufacturer in this case, to not only check the box for coding, but then follow back and address coverage and finally pricing. All three of those are together now, and things are looking up for sure for that technology. Powered exoskeletons, I mean, if anybody's ever seen them at work, I wouldn't call these O&P per se, traditional O&P, but they are now covered as orthoses. Are orthotists heavily involved in this market? Not yet. It's primarily being done in the rehab space with a lot of OT involvement, a lot of PT involvement. But there's opportunities here to get this into the O&P space, training orthotists in how to properly fit and utilize these style devices. But these are things that for years were just looked aside, and we're just kind of said, okay, that doesn't fit anywhere, so we're just not going to cover it. And that's recently changed in the last 18 months. We've got now, there's coverage, there's reimbursement. Okay, we don't have coding yet. That's the next step. But you got reimbursement, you got coverage. Upper extremity prostheses. This is a work in progress. This is an example of how working with the PDAC can lead to additional conversations that lead to new code applications. So, 17 years ago or so, Medicare, for whatever reason, really took down the upper extremity prosthetic coding system, and they really shrunk the code set to about 7 codes. With the development of technology for microprocessor-controlled partial hands, individualized fingers, even some of the mechanical fingers, this is just a huge hole in coding that does not really anymore represent at all the technology that's out there. So there is an upper extremity work group that's been put together through the Academy Upper Limb Society, working together with some AOPA members, working through the O&P Alliance to actually start the process of rewriting and suggesting a whole new code set to CMS. So I believe right now there are maybe 6 or 7 code applications that are in the hopper that have been submitted to CMS to try and modernize this coding system. The partial hand coding system that is out there today includes references to things like Robinade's prostheses, which are, technology that's 40, 50 years old that I don't know that anybody uses or products exist anymore. I'm not an upper extremity guy, so forgive me. I don't know a whole lot about it, but people that are tell me that this is, they are working closely with CMS on starting to get revisions to the code system. So that's kind of where we are. I hope this is helpful. If folks have comments, questions, thoughts, please come to the mic because we are recording this session, since I know a lot of folks would not be able to get to it. But we have a couple minutes, not really a lot, but a couple minutes. I can take any questions y'all have or any thoughts, concerns, general grievances. Yes, sir. Okay, so we are recording. The question was, I'm going to say it just for the recording. The question was, where can people access this after? So the virtual assembly will go live I think October 1st. This is an unpublished session. So this was not anything that is on the program. It was not open to anybody but manufacturers. You will be getting an email at some point from Kelly that will include a link to access this recording for folks on your team that were not able to see it. It won't be part of the virtual assembly at all. You will not see this session at all in there, but you will get a link to this recording at some point. Yes, ma'am.
So there were 4 different medical contacts for the DMAC. You said their names really fast.
Okay, I'll go over those again, and I'll spell them. The jurisdiction A is, of course, now it's gone completely out of my mind. Sorry. It's Smitha, S-M-I-T-H-A, Ballyamanda. It's B-A-L-L-Y-A-M-A-A-N-D-A. So Ballyamanda, but it's pronounced Ballyamanda. Jurisdiction B is Sunil Lalla, S-U-N-I-L. Last name is L-A-L-L. No, L-A-L-L-A, sorry. Sunil Lalla. Jurisdiction C is Robert Hoover. I'm going to assume everybody's got Robert. Hoover is H-O-O-V-E-R. Jurisdiction D is Angela Jenny, and Jenny is J-E-N-N-Y, I believe. Those are the 4. And then the PDAC is Jason Stroud, S-T-R-O-U-D. Okay? All right. All right, if there's nothing else, like I said, I know hall time is precious. So I'm very, very appreciative and thankful for you joining me today. And if you all have questions for me or Devin Bernard, who's my colleague on the coding reimbursement team at AOPA, it's real easy to find us. Just go to the AOPA website. My email is jmcternan@aopanet.org, JMCTERNAN, like Nancy, at AOPANET.org. But it's all on our website. All right. Thanks, y'all.